everybody. Kelly Zitlow here. I have Patrick McQueen again, once again. He's so popular. I get requests all the time. So Patrick, thank you for taking time today to chat with us.
My pleasure. Happy to do it.
For those of you that don't know, Patrick is an attorney, but you really focus in real estate, right? Is that your primary real estate law, litigation, etc.?
Yeah, anything real estate related. If the law has some sort of overlap with real estate, chances are we've done it or can do it. That includes, commercial stuff, residential stuff, litigation stuff, transactional stuff. So anything real estate related, chances are we've done it.
Oh, great. And Patrick and I have known each other for, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything because then I'm really going to show my age. So I'm just going to speak for a few years anyway, right? And he's my go-to guy when it comes to real estate related questions that have to do with the law. So today we're going to talk a little bit about short-term rentals, the whole Airbnb and VRBO, and there's a lot of conversation out there, and I see it in the media, etc. So tell us what we need to know.
Well, 2020 and 2021 were actually some very, very interesting years for short-term rentals. Right now, we've got some interesting new legislation, well, not legislation, rules that are coming out from the city of Scottsdale and the town of Paradise Valley. They're trying to tweak their municipal codes to kind of clamp down on, too many people in these houses. And we'll see if those end up being legal. We don't know yet. We don't know if those resolutions are going to be legal. So that's what's happening at the moment. There was, if you recall, at the beginning of 2021 and at the beginning of 2020, there was some legislation at the state level. And what some state legislators wanted to do was to give authority to the local municipalities, the towns, the cities, and the counties to come up with their own regulations. Now, those ultimately failed. Okay. And so what we have a set of statutes, state statutes that basically say, look, towns, cities, municipalities can't regulate in this area, can't regulate short-term rentals. But now we see Scottsdale and now we see PV kind of poking around on the edges of what it is they may be able to do. So there's this kind of buzz going around about whether what's going on in Scottsdale, what's going on in Paradise Valley is going to be you violate the state statute or whether it's going to be okay. I don't really have an opinion. I sort of deal with the legislative decisions after they come out. But so we saw some legislative changes or some poking around the edges of the current legislature or the current statutes. We also had some cases that came out that dealt with the coronavirus. And there were 3 or 4 cases out there, somewhere in Arizona, somewhere in other states, where people said, hey, look, you owe me my medical bills. I got sick at your place. I got sick at your rental. And those cases went a little bit further. It went a little bit longer on than I thought they would. I thought they would be dismissed due to causation. They were ultimately dismissed due to causation, but the courts allowed them to linger on a little bit longer than I thought that they would. I thought they would get dismissed pretty quickly due to causation. How do you go about proving that this is where you picked this up? Pretty tough. Ultimately, that was the right call, I think. And then we also had some cases on cancellation policies or termination policies. So let's say that you booked, for 3 or 4 months, and there was no cancellation policy, or there was a cancellation policy, but you had these extenuating circumstances like COVID, like some other illness, or like the city was shutting down, or you couldn't do certain things. Ultimately, the courts there also said, hey, look, we're going to follow what's written. We're going to follow your contracts. We're going to abide by what you've agreed to. So if you've agreed that you don't get any of your money back, you don't get any of your money back. And so we're finally starting, courts are usually 9 to 12 months behind what's really going on. And so that sort of just proves that too. But so that's kind of issue number 3 in the short-term rental world that we've been dealing with. One of the other things that has been interesting is this whole concept of short-term rental arbitrage. And it's the no money down way to get into short-term renting. And what it is, let's say that you've got a traditional rental, Kelly, and I go to you and I say, well, let me rent out your house for 12 months. And then I, as the tenant, turn around and Airbnb the heck out of it. and make money on that arbitrage, on that spread. And it's happening a lot. And, there's no per se prohibition on it. So a lot of millennials like doing it. We'll just put it that way. There's these younger kids, I want to call them younger guys, younger gals, who are making so much money doing this. And it blows my mind. It's a simple concept. You're just subleasing out somebody else's home. You've not really put any money down, and you're making boatloads of money. And so there's really two steps in the analysis there as to whether that's legal or not. First step is, well, what is the locality that I'm in, or what does the state say about short-term rentals? Well, again, in Arizona, we can do short-term rentals pretty much. Second step is, well, what is my landlord going to say? What can they do to stop me? We start with the premise that every contract is assignable in Arizona. Okay, so there's case law that says every contract in Arizona is assignable, meaning I can assign it to you, I can assign it to somebody else, basically meaning I can do a sublease, basically meaning I can assign my lease to somebody else. Okay, that's the law, but then you look at what's in the contract itself. Is there a prohibition on assignment? And yes, there's normally a prohibition on assignment or subleases or other occupancy, particularly under the standard form Arizona Association of Realtors lease. So people are crossing through that assignment provision, they're crossing through the sublease provision, and some landlords are saying, okay, fine, go ahead and do this, pay me more, and we'll do it. And so you look to determine whether it's legal, you first have to look at the state and see if there's any regulations against it. And then you look at the contract, then you have to modify the contract, certainly. And there's some other things that the landlords are going to want to do to protect themselves, but it's actually pretty legal. Now, in other places, it's not legal, because what happens is rents go up for everybody, right? Oh, if I'm in on this with my landlord and I'm going to go and sublease it out to a bunch of other people and make a bunch of money, well, then he's going to jack up his rate, and then everybody else's rents get jacked up, and then we can't have affordable housing anymore. So and so other states have recognized that problem or that issue and said, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. You can't do this, or we're going to put some major constraints on you doing this. So it's pretty fascinating.
To me, that there would be a risk to the homeowner, i.e. landlord. If I think I'm going to rent the house to you as a person or a family for 12 months, and then, you have 50 families potentially coming in and out of that house for 12 months. I mean, my mind is just spinning with all of the potential risk, so I'm assuming that your recommendation, if you are the homeowner or the landlord, and you're striking the assignability or not, but I think just getting guidance on that, there must be some other things you probably advise. What might those be?
Totally. Yeah. No, there's a bunch of stuff that you should do if you're an owner and you're okay with this happening. And look, there's a lot of owners who are totally okay with this happening. And sometimes it's owners of apartment buildings and they want to do it for an entire floor. Sometimes it's multiple units. Sometimes it's just a single family residence. You absolutely need to have the appropriate insurance. And, I'm not an insurance guru or anything like that, but there are ways you can structure your insurance and the tenant's insurance to make sure that you're covered under a tenant's policy, that you're covered under your own policy for this type of activity. You absolutely want an indemnification agreement from your tenant as well. That indemnification agreement basically says, look, if you get me sued, if you get me in trouble, you're paying my legal fees. You're paying this judgment. This is not on me. This is your little venture. The third thing is, and this is kind of toeing the line, because this is one way that these tenants or these arbitrage folks, I don't even know what to call them, are pitching this idea to the landlords. They're saying, hey, look, I'm going to cut you in. I'll give you 30% of my profit because, we're using your house in this fashion. I'll give you some profit. We'll be joint venture partners. And I think that's a bad idea. If somebody's coming to you and offering you that as an idea, well, then you lose this idea of indemnification. Then you may have an insurance issue. And so to be persuaded by that argument from the folks who are doing this, I would clarify in your agreement that says we're not buddies here. This is an arm's length deal. And I think that's an important thing. So those 3 or 4 things, then you're definitely going to want to take a look at the underlying short-term rental agreement that your tenant is using. You're going to want the ability to come in and evict. You're going to want the ability to inspect and all sorts of. You want to call these folks guests too, by the way. You don't want them being called tenants,
Right.
because if they're tenants, I might have to evict them.
Oh my gosh, so much. I had no idea that was going on. Where have I been before?
I'm telling you, this came on pretty quickly. I saw it happening 3, 4, 5 years ago. And then over the last year, it's like, well, wait a minute, there's a no money down way to do this. And somebody much smarter than me figured out that you can make money on this. And so I'm just kind of here trying to poke around the legal edges to make sure that people don't get themselves into too much trouble.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much. Any other kind of, mistakes that you see that are common that actually end up to you? Because obviously if it gets to you, then there's probably some guidance or education we should be doing on this. Short-term rentals.
That's a great question. Absolutely talk to an insurance rep. The standard sort of Allstate or State Farm policy that most homeowners have, they don't really work for all situations. And so you want to talk to somebody who is really in the business when it comes to insuring these types of places. Have a short-term rental agreement over and above whatever you're getting from Airbnb or Vrbo or whatever platform. Before you enter my house, you have to agree to sign this document or to e-sign this document. And it says, this is what my policy is on X, Y, and Z. So having an agreement, a separate agreement, having insurance, consider having an LLC as well. You want to separate this is kind of a business, right? You want to separate that from your personal stuff. So those 3 things are going to be the big ones that we recommend people utilize to stay out of trouble.
All right, well, we definitely want to keep people out of trouble. So thank you so much for sharing this information, and we'll certainly, I'm sure, be in touch once we see either Scottsdale or Paradise Valley make potentially some real regulatory changes about short-term rentals, but that's to come. Thank you so much, Patrick. It's always great.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.